story of the Roman Empire begins long before there was an empire at all. Tonight we explore its origins, its heroes, its villains. We step back through its entire history to discover how the infamous empire was built and how it managed to create one of the greatest and most powerful empires in the whole of history. It all begins in myth and legend. In the smoking aftermath of Troy's fall, the doomed city's prince Aeneas sailed west with a band of refugees, guided, so poets tell us, by omens and the favour of his mother Venus. After wandering among islands and monsters, he landed on the banks of the Tiber River. There, the exile bound his Trojan past to a promised Italian future by marrying into the Latin royal line. If you enjoy tonight's story, I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a like, subscribe, or maybe comment on where you are listening from. Now sit back, relax, close your eyes, and we will begin our journey. Generations rolled by. In the hill town of Alba Longa, a kind king, Numitor, was pushed aside by his brother Amulius, who forced Numitor's daughter to become a sworn virgin, so she could bear no heirs. But the war god Mars visited her, and she gave birth to twins, Romulus and Remus. Amulius ordered the babies thrown into the river. The flooded Tiber set their basket gently on a muddy bank near a cave. A she-wolf found them, fed them, and kept them alive until a shepherd and his wife took the boys home. As teens, the twins learned the truth, overthrew Amulius, and put Numitor back on the throne. Yet they wanted their own city. Choosing neighbouring hills, they argued over which to build on. The fight turned deadly. Romulus killed Remus, and so legend tells of a founded city called Rome. The year 753 BCE, Romulus filled his new city with anyone who would come. Runaway slaves, drifters, exiles. With few women, he staged sporting games for the nearby Sabines, and during the event, grabbed their daughters. War followed, then a truce, and finally a joint community of Romans and Sabines. 6 more kings ruled after Romulus. Some brought peace treaties and religious customs, others built walls, drains or bridges. The last ruler, Tarquinius Superbus, the Proud, used fear to stay in power. His son's attack on the noble woman Lucretia sparked outrage. In 509 BCE, leading families drove out the Tarquins and ended the monarchy. They created the res publica, literally public business. 2 elected consuls would share power each year. A senate of elders advised. Popular assemblies could vote on laws and war. But early Rome was no easy democracy. Old guard patrician clans guarded their privileges while common plebeians demanded a voice. Over 200 years, walkouts, street protests, and hard bargains produced key reforms. The people's tribunes gained veto power, the 12 tables wrote basic laws in public, and debts were gradually eased. While Rome argued at home, enemies pressed the wooden walls. Small wars with Latin neighbours, hill tribes, and raiding bands were a yearly fact. Each spring, consuls raised citizen legions, farmers carrying oval shields and throwing spears, and marched out on dirt roads. Victories brought farmland and new allies. Defeats forced quick learning. Rome borrowed religious rituals from the Etruscans, tight phalanx, fighting from the Greeks, and more flexible tactics from the mountain Samnites. Every foe left a tip or a warning the Romans stored away. A famous scare came when the Etruscan king Lars Porsena besieged the city. To prove Roman toughness, the young soldier Mucius stuck his hand into a fire without flinching. Porsena backed off. Such stories, half fact, half morale booster, told Romans they could out-endure anyone. In 390 BCE, disaster. A band of tall, fair-haired Gauls swept down from the north and crushed a Roman army at the Allia River. They broke into the city and burned it street by street. Only the hilltop Capitoline held out. Defender Marcus Manlius fought the raiders off the walls. Still, the rest of Rome lay in ashes. To make the invaders leave, Romans paid a huge ransom in gold, then claimed, perhaps inventing, that their general corrected the crooked scales with the words, "We Romans don't pay by weight, but by the sword," and chased the Gauls away. Rome's early centuries show how myths, resilience, and constant adaptation can turn a small settlement into a rising force. They also remind us that progress is uneven. Brutal acts, sharp class fights, and sudden setbacks paved the road to later greatness. Understanding these roots helps explain everything that followed: the Italian conquests, the struggle with Carthage, and the long clash between liberty and power that still echoes in modern politics. After the Gauls torched Rome, stunned citizens shoveled debris, swore never again, and built a 12-kilometer ring of stone walls dotted with square towers. Inside, roofers fixed temples and scribes recopied burnt archives. Outside, consuls drilled the legions harder than ever and switched from the old Greek-style phalanx to a flexible maniple line, small blocks of 120 men that could twist through Italy's hills like schools of armored fish. South of Rome lay the rugged central Apennines, home to the warlike Samnites. In 343 BCE, Rome sent troops to defend its Campanian allies, starting a stop-and-start fight that lasted almost 50 years. The low point came in 321 BCE at the Caudine Forks. Samnites trapped 2 full Roman armies in a narrow valley and forced them to crawl under a yoke of spears. Total humiliation. Rome answered with ideas, not surrender. It paved the Via Appia to move troops fast, planted military colonies on conquered land, and kept learning from setbacks. At Sentinum in 295 BCE, a vast mix of Samnites, Gauls, and Etruscans lined up against Rome. In the heat of battle, Consul Decius Mus rode straight into the enemy ranks, a self-sacrifice thought to win the gods' favor. Rome won big. By 290 BCE, the Samnites were beaten, and Rome controlled Italy from the Rubicon in the north to Calabria in the south. Conquest alone would not hold a patchwork peninsula. Rome offered a sliding scale of deals: full citizenship with voting rights for towns close to the capital, partial citizenship, no vote, but legal protection for others, allied status for the rest, local freedom in exchange for troops. Roads, aqueducts, and travelling magistrates spread Latin language and law. By 275 BCE, Italy looked less like occupied territory and more like a loose but loyal federation pivoting around Rome. Greek cities in southern Italy hated this new order. In 280 BCE, they hired Pyrrhus of Epirus, a cousin of Alexander the Great, to push Rome back. He brought 25 war elephants, tanks of the ancient world. Pyrrhus won at Heraclea and Asculum, but at huge cost. "One more win like this," he sighed, "and I'm ruined." Rome could replace losses. Pyrrhus could not. He left Italy. By 272 BCE, the key port of Tarentum had surrendered, sealing Roman rule over the whole peninsula. Control of Italy pointed Rome toward the Mediterranean, already nicknamed Mare Nostrum, our sea. One obstacle loomed: Carthage, a rich Phoenician city commanding North Africa, Sardinia, and much of the western sea lanes. Tension over Sicily, both grain basket and naval pivot, sparked war in 264 BCE. Rome had no real navy, so it copied a captured Carthaginian ship bolt for bolt and added a spiked boarding bridge called the corvus, turning sea fights into land fights on decks. After 23 exhausting years, storms wrecked 4 Roman fleets. Rome finally beat the Carthaginians at the Aegates Islands in 241 BCE. Carthage paid a giant indemnity and gave up Sicily and later Sardinia. Rome now ran its first overseas province and tasted the silver of regular tribute. Cheap Sicilian grain undercut small Italian farmers. Many lost land to rich senators who built vast slave-run estates, latifundia. Social tension rose even as Rome's confidence soared. Meanwhile, Carthage looked to Spain for new wealth. There, young Commander Hannibal Barca swore eternal hatred of Rome at his father's altar. In 218 BCE, Hannibal attacked Saguntum, a Roman ally in Spain. Rome braced for a sea invasion. Instead, Hannibal marched. 90,000 foot soldiers, 12,000 cavalry, and about 30 elephants over the Pyrenees, across the Rhone on rafts, then painfully through the snow-capped Alps. Half his force died, but the sight of elephants in Italy's northern valleys shocked local tribes into joining him. Hannibal crushed Roman armies at the Trebia River, 218 BCE, and Lake Trasimene, 217 BCE. Panic gripped the city. The Senate appointed cautious Fabius Maximus as dictator. He harassed Hannibal's supply lines but refused battle, earning the nickname Cunctator, the delayer. Impatient Romans dumped Fabius, marched out again, and suffered their greatest defeat, Cannae, 216 BCE. In one day about 50,000 Romans died, a ring of corpses piling hip-high around Hannibal's troops. Yet Rome would not quit. It levied new teenagers, freed slaves for service, and kept most allies loyal. While Hannibal roamed southern Italy, young Publius Cornelius Scipio retook Spain, cutting Carthage's lifeline. In 204 BCE, Scipio invaded Africa itself. Carthage recalled Hannibal, and at Zama, 202 BCE, Scipio's cavalry, helped by Numidian horsemen, broke Hannibal's lines. Carthage lost its fleet and all foreign ambitions. Scipio gained the honor name Africanus. Rome now owned the western Mediterranean. Next, Rome punished Macedon for backing Hannibal. At Cynocephalae, 197 BCE, the nimble Maniple beat the famous Macedonian phalanx on hilly ground. Rome proclaimed Greek freedom, but quietly set up client states. Campaigns against the Seleucid king Antiochus III followed. Defeat at Magnesia, 190 BCE, shrank his empire. Ships, statues, and piles of cash poured into Rome. Wealthy generals celebrated multi-day triumphs with caged tigers and gold-painted chariots. Ordinary veterans came home broke, their farms swallowed by debt and slave competition. In 133 BCE, Tiberius Gracchus, an aristocrat with a social conscience, became tribune. He pushed a land reform bill to cap estate size and give extra land to the poor. Senators saw betrayal and clubbed him to death on the Capitoline Hill. Rome's first political bloodshed since the monarchy fell. His brother Gaius tried wider reforms 10 years later and died in street fighting. The killings showed that the Republic was cracking under imperial weight. Old Senator Cato the Elder ended every speech with "Delenda est Carthago." Carthage must be wiped out. Though Carthage was now a small trade city, Rome found a pretext in 149 BCE. For 3 grim years, Romans besieged it, battering walls, fighting house to house. In 146 BCE, Scipio Emilianus, Scipio Africanus's grandson, watched flames swallow the harbour. He quoted Homer on fallen Troy and wept. Sensing all empires share the same fate, Rome levelled Carthage, allegedly spread salt on the soil, and made Africa a province. That same year, Romans sacked Corinth, ending Greek independence. By 146 BCE, Rome ruled from Spain to Greece, from the Alps to North Africa. Treasure filled its coffers, but society was straining. Behind the marble victories, new power players. Marius, Jugurtha, a fierce young aristocrat named Sulla, were waiting to test whether the old republican rules could survive an empire built on endless war. The next era would show that they could not. By 146 BCE, Rome had crushed Carthage and Corinth and now ruled the Mediterranean. But victory brought problems. Cheap grain from new provinces bankrupted small farmers. Veterans found their fields sold to rich senators who worked huge estates with slaves. Crowds of jobless citizens filled Rome, living on the public grain dole. Ambitious generals saw a chance to trade promises of land for loyal armies. And the old checks and balances of the Republic began to bend. Trouble fled first in North Africa. Jugurtha, king of Numidia, bribed Roman officials and murdered rivals. A disgusted tribune shouted that Rome is for sale to whoever can pay. War was declared in 111 BCE, but corrupt commanders dragged their feet. Into this mess stepped Gaius Marius, a tough soldier from the small town of Arpinum. He ran for consul in 107 BCE as a homo novus, a new man without a famous family, and won. Marius ended the property rule for joining the army, letting landless men sign up in return for pay and a promise of farmland later. His professional soldiers finally trapped Jugurtha, thanks to crafty Lieutenant Lucius Cornelius Sulla, who talked a local prince into betrayal. Rome celebrated, but the rivalry between Marius and the younger Sulla had begun. Almost at once new danger rolled in. The Cimbri and Teutones, migrant tribes towing wagons and families, crushed 2 Roman armies at Arausio, 105 BCE. Panic hit the city. Re-elected consul year after year, Marius drilled his veterans hard, issued standard gear, and turned legions into a fast, flexible force. At Aquae Sextiae, 102 BCE, and Vercellae, 101 BCE, he destroyed the invaders. Rome hailed him as a second founder, but multiple straight consulships bent an old rule meant to stop any one man from gaining too much power. Rome's Italian allies, the Socii, had fought and bled beside Roman legions for centuries, yet still lacked citizenship. After the reformer Marcus Livius Drusus was murdered, many allies rebelled in 91 BCE, setting up their own capital called Italia. The social war was brutal, but in 89 BCE Rome offered citizenship to allies who laid down arms. By war's end, almost every free man from the Po River to the Straits of Messina held a Roman vote, swelling the citizen lists, but also the pool of men loyal to popular generals instead of the Senate. Soon another crisis hit. In the east, King Mithridates VI of Pontus slaughtered tens of thousands of Romans living in Asia Minor. The Senate gave the command against him to Sulla, now consul and champion of the conservative nobles. But the People's Assembly, pushed by Marius's ally Sulpicius Rufus, transferred the job to Marius. Sulla answered with a shocking move. He led his legions back into Italy and for the first time in history, marched on Rome, 88 BCE. Streets ran red. Marius fled. After Sulla sailed east to fight Mithridates, the exiled Marius returned with his own troops, seized the city, and carried out bloody revenge. He died soon after, but the message was clear. Armed force now decided Roman politics. Sulla finished his Eastern War, then marched on Rome again in 83 BCE. He defeated Marian supporters at the Colline Gate, posted kill lists called proscriptions, and seized enemy property to pay his soldiers. Appointed dictator for rewriting the constitution, he doubled the Senate, clipped the power of the people's tribunes, and set age limits on high office. In 79 BCE, he retired to his villa and died the next year, believing he had saved the Republic, though he had really shown every future strongman exactly how to take it over. Out of the chaos rose a new trio. Pompey earned the nickname Magnus, the Great, by chasing Marian rebels across Sicily and Africa, and later wiping out Mediterranean pirates in just 3 months. Marcus Licinius Crassus, richest man in Rome, crushed Spartacus' slave revolt 71 BCE, but was jealous of Pompey's glory. Gaius Julius Caesar, young, charming, deep in debt, won the public with lavish games and sharp speeches. In 63 BCE, bankrupt aristocrat Lucius Sergius Catilina plotted to burn Rome and cancel debts. Consul Marcus Tullius Cicero exposed him with fiery orations. How long, Catiline, will you test our patience? Catiline died fighting in Etruria, and Cicero was hailed as father of the fatherland, though some worried about quick executions without trial, an omen of civil rights shortcuts to come. In 60 BCE, Pompey, Crassus, and Caesar cut a private deal historians call the First Triumvirate. Pompey got land for his veterans, Crassus secured favorable tax contracts for his business friends, and Caesar won the consulship plus a huge provincial command in Gaul. During his consul year, 59 BCE, Caesar rammed bills through with street toughs. Led by the flashy Publius Clodius, from 58 to 50 BCE, Caesar campaigned in Gaul. His own commentaries, the Gallic War, read like action reports, defeating the migrating Helvetii, bridging the Rhine in 10 days, landing in Britain, and finally trapping chieftain Vercingetorix inside Lycia with a double ring of walls. Gold, slaves, and glory streamed south. His veterans adored him. Senators grew afraid. Crassus died fighting Parthia at Carrhae, 53 BCE, and Pompey drifted toward the conservative Senate. In 50 BCE, they ordered Caesar to give up his army before entering Italy. On a cold January night in 49 BCE, Caesar reached the small frontier river Rubicon, paused, and then crossed, saying, "The die is cast." Civil war began. Pompey and most senators fled to Greece. At Pharsalus, 48 BCE, Caesar's tired 22,000 men beat Pompey's larger force. Pompey fled to Egypt, where teenage King Ptolemy XIII murdered him, hoping to please Caesar. Instead, Caesar wept over his rival's severed head. In Egypt, he sided with Cleopatra VII, helped her win the throne, and spent the winter cruising the Nile. After mopping up opposition in Africa and Spain, Caesar returned to Rome in 45 BCE, master of the Mediterranean. The Senate, hoping for order, made him dictator for life. He reworked the calendar into the Julian year, started public works, and planned to settle veterans overseas. He also enlarged the Senate to 900 members, filling seats with provincials, popular with outsiders, alarming to traditionalists. Fearing permanent monarchy, a group of senators led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius struck. On the 15th of March 44 BCE, Caesar entered a Senate meeting in the theatre of Pompey. Daggers flashed. He fell under 23 wounds, reportedly saying, "You too, Brutus." His death threw Rome into panic. Caesar left no sons, but his 19-year-old grandnephew, Gaius Octavius, learned he was adopted as Caesar's heir. Veterans beat their shields, demanding justice. Civil war would flare again, and the Republic, already on life support, would not survive the shock. The next chapter belongs to Octavian, Mark Antony, and the birth of an empire that still pretended to be a republic, at least on paper. When Julius Caesar fell under Senate knives in March 44 BCE, the killers expected cheers for saving the Republic. Instead, Rome froze in fear. Shops locked up, crowds stayed home, and nobody knew who commanded the legions camped outside the city. At Caesar's funeral, Mark Antony, co-consul and longtime aide, held up the blood-soaked toga and read Caesar's generous will. The mob exploded, burning the houses of several conspirators. Brutus and Cassius fled east to raise troops. A power vacuum yawned. Into this chaos sailed Gaius Octavius, Caesar's thin, bookish, 19-year-old grandnephew. Caesar's will adopted him, posthumously, as Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, and left him most of the estate. Advisors urged him to lie low, but Octavian gambled on boldness. He paid Caesar's veterans with borrowed money, won their devotion, and walked into Rome claiming his legal rights. The Senate, led by orator Cicero, tried to play Octavian against Antony. Cicero's fiery speeches, the Philippics, branded Antony a tyrant. Octavian pretended to listen, raised his own private army, and demanded a consulship. Faced with 11 legions on the doorstep, the Senate caved. In late 43 BCE, Octavian met Antony and the general Lepidus on an island near Bologna. They formed the Second Triumvirate, a legally backed 3-man committee with dictatorial powers for 5 years. Their first move was pure terror. They published prescriptions, hit lists of enemies. Even Cicero's name appeared. Bounty hunters cut off his head and hands and nailed them to the speaker's platform he had once commanded. Estates of the executed paid for soldiers' bonuses. The triumvirs marched east with nearly 20 legions. In October 42 BCE at Philippi, northern Greece, Antony's fast flanking and Octavian's dogged centre smashed Brutus and Cassius. Both conspirators committed suicide. The Republic's last major army was gone. Victory fed suspicion. The partners divided the world. Antony, rich, volatile, took the east. Octavian, careful and relentless, took the west. Lepidus got North Africa, but soon tried to seize Sicily and was pushed into retirement. Sicily itself was a problem. Sextus Pompey, son of Pompey the Great, used pirate fleets to choke Rome's grain supply. Octavian's friend Marcus Agrippa built a new navy, added grappling hooks, and beat Sextus at Naulochus, 36 BCE. Rome's breadbaskets were safe. Octavian's prestige soared. Meanwhile, Antony set up court in Alexandria with Cleopatra VII. Their twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, symbolized an Eastern power bloc. In 34 BCE, Antony's donations of Alexandria handed conquered lands to Cleopatra and their children, praising Caesar's son, Caesarion, as king of kings. Octavian pounced. He seized Antony's sealed will from the Vestal Virgins and read it aloud. Talk of burial in Alexandria. Huge gifts to the queen. Senators gasped. Octavian framed the coming fight as Rome versus an Egyptian temptress, not Romans versus Romans. Both sides armed up. On the 2nd of September 31 BCE, their fleets clashed at Actium on the Greek coast. Agrippa's heavier, better-drilled ships boxed in Antony's line. At a critical moment, Cleopatra's treasure-laden squadron bolted south. Antony followed, leaving most of his fleet leaderless. Octavian won the sea, then hunted the couple to Egypt. In August 30 BCE, facing hopeless odds, Antony fell on his sword. Cleopatra chose poisonous asp, or fast-acting venom in a hairpin. Nobody is sure. Octavian spared their children, but quietly killed Caesarion. One Caesar is enough. Octavian returned to Rome master of everything yet wary of Caesar's fate. On 13th January 27 BCE, he staged political theatre. He gave back all powers to Senate and people. Senators begged him to stay in charge and granted him a new title, Augustus, the revered one. What emerged was the Principate. Outwardly, the Republic survived. Consuls were elected, assemblies met, senators debated. But Augustus held two key powers indefinitely. First, proconsular command over frontier provinces loaded with legions. Second, tribunician power, letting him veto laws and protect citizens. Soldiers swore loyalty to him personally, not to Rome. It was monarchy in everything but name, wrapped in old-fashioned forms. Augustus got to work. Army reform, 16-year terms, standard pay, and a retirement fund called the Aerarium Militar, financed by a 5% inheritance tax. Veterans settled in colonies from Spain to Syria, spreading Latin life. City safety. He created a fire brigade and a police force, vigils. Morals and family laws. Tax breaks for married couples, penalties for adultery. Marble makeover. The Forum of Augustus, the Ara Patis, Altar of Peace, and many temples. I found Rome a city of brick, he boasted, and left it a city of marble. Trade and travel boomed under Roman roads and pirate-free seas. Writers flourished under imperial patronage. Virgil's Aeneid, Livy's History, Horace's Odes. The 40-plus years of his rule opened the long Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Even Augustus hit limits. Campaigns in Spain and the Alps succeeded, but an attempt to annex Germany failed catastrophically. In 9 CE, Varus led 3 legions into the Teutoburg forest and walked into an ambush set by the Cheruscan leader Arminius. Every soldier died. Legion eagles were lost. Augustus pounded his head against a doorpost. "Varus, give me back my legions." After that, Rome stuck mostly to the Rhine frontier. Augustus had no surviving sons. He groomed potential heirs. Marcellus died young. Agrippa, his right-hand man, died 12 BCE. Then Agrippa's sons, Gaius and Lucius, both died in their early 20s. Finally, he adopted his stern stepson Tiberius and made him co-ruler. On the 19th of August, 14 CE, Augustus died at age 75 in the town of Nola. Supposedly his last words were, "Have I played my part well? If so, applaud as I exit." The Senate immediately voted him a god, Divus Augustus. Temples went up across the empire. Priests offered incense to the man who said he had restored the republic while quietly ending it. Behind him, he left a stable government, a paid standing army, a glittering capital, and an uneasy question. Could the system work without his personal skill and patience? His chosen heir Tiberius, capable but gloomy, now had to find out. The story of the Julio-Claudians had begun, and Rome would soon learn how thin the line was between peaceful rule and paranoid tyranny. When Augustus died, his 55-year-old stepson Tiberius took over. Tiberius was a first-rate general and careful with money, but he hated politics and trusted almost no one. For 6 years he managed the empire well, keeping taxes low, fixing roads, and refusing new wars. Then his only son Drusus died. grief hardened into suspicion. Tiberius leaned on Sejanus, head of the Praetorian Guard. Sejanus ran treason trials, seized property, and dreamed of marrying into the royal family. Rumours reached Tiberius, now living on the island of Capri among astrologers and gossip. In 31 CE, he ordered Sejanus arrested and executed in a single day. Panic swept Rome. More trials followed. By the time Tiberius died in 37 CE, senators were relieved to see him go. The new ruler, Gaius Caligula, nicknamed Little Boot from his childhood army shoes, was 24 and wildly popular at first. He ended treason cases, gave bonuses to troops, and staged huge games. After a severe illness, his personality flipped. He called himself a living god, joked about making his horse a consul, and bankrupted the treasury on palaces of gold. Officers of the guard feared for their lives. In early 41 CE, they stabbed Caligula in a hallway and killed his wife and baby. In the chaos, soldiers found Caligula's uncle, Claudius, a shy 50-year-old, with a limp and stutter, hiding behind a curtain. They hailed him emperor, partly as a joke, partly to keep their jobs. The joke backfired. Claudius proved smart and hard-working. He put capable freedmen, formal slaves he had freed, in charge of finance and records, expanded citizenship to provincial elites, and, in 43 CE, sent 4 legions to conquer Britain. Court life was less tidy. His third wife Messalina plotted a fake marriage with a lover. Claudius had both killed. His next wife Agrippina, Caligula's sister, talked him into adopting her teenage son Nero. In 54 CE, Claudius died, likely poisoned by mushrooms served by Agrippina. Nero began well. Guided by philosopher Seneca and guard prefect Burrus, he cut taxes and let the Senate speak freely. But Nero loved music, racing, and theatre more than paperwork. He tired of his mother's control and ordered her killed in 59 CE. In 64 CE, a great fire burned 10 of Rome's 14 districts. Nero organized relief, but was suspected of arson to clear land for his new palace, the Golden House. To shift blame, he targeted the small sect of Christians, lighting some as human torches in his gardens. Revolt spread. The warrior queen Boudica rose in Britain. Generals in Gaul and Spain declared for Galba. The Senate and the Guard deserted Nero. In June 68 CEE, cornered, he stabbed himself, muttering, "What an artist dies in me." With him, the Julio-Claudian line ended. A quick shuffle of rulers followed. 1. Galba, strict but stingy, killed by his own guards. 2. Otho, popular with troops, defeated by a Rhine army backing. 3. Vitellius, indulgent. His forces looted Italy. 4th. Vespasian, governor of Judea, marched in, swept aside Vitellius, and took the throne. Vespasian, 69 to 79 CE, was a no-nonsense soldier from a modest Italian town. He repaired finances with new taxes. Even on public toilets, money doesn't stink, he joked. He started the Colosseum, paid for by treasures from the Jewish revolt. His son Titus had destroyed the temple in Jerusalem in 70 CE. Titus ruled only 2 years, 79 to 81 CE. During his watch, Mount Vesuvius buried Pompeii and Herculaneum. A fire and plague hit Rome. Titus spent imperial funds on relief and was mourned when he died, likely of fever. Their younger brother Domitian, 81 to 96 CE, was energetic and suspicious. He raised soldiers' pay, fortified the German frontier, and demanded to be called Lord and God. Senate conspirators stabbed him in 96 CE. The killers needed a quick, safe choice. They picked elderly Senator Nerva. He re-won the army's trust by adopting popular General Trajan. This set a smart rule. Emperors would adopt the best man available instead of relying on bloodline. Trajan, 98 to 117 CE, first non-Italian emperor, born in Spain, conquered rich Dacia, modern Romania. His column still spirals above the Forum. Later he marched to Mesopotamia, briefly reaching the Persian Gulf, the empire's largest size. Senate called him Optimus Princeps, best ruler. Hadrian, 117 to 138 CE. Trajan's ward, pulled back from overstretch in the east, toured provinces non-stop, built Hadrian's Wall across Britain, and finished the domed pantheon we see today. Loved Greek culture, mourned young companion Antinous, whom he deified. Antoninus Pius, 138 to 161 CE. Peaceful administrator, no major wars, expanded legal rights for women and slaves. His calm reign was so uneventful that later Romans saw it as a golden age. Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus, 161 to 169 CE co-rule. Marcus alone to 180. Marcus, a Stoic philosopher, wrote his meditations while fighting Germanic tribes on the Danube. Co-emperor Lucius Verus handled the Parthian War but died of plague, the same Antonine plague that killed millions. Marcus beat back invasions but, against his better judgment, made his own son Commodus heir. Why this era matters. Power settled on the emperor. The Senate still met, but real authority rested with one man, and for a century, that man was often competent. Professional army, fixed pay, fixed terms, and camps that grew into towns linked to Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Cultural bloom, Colosseum games, Roman law courts, Greek sculptures, and a web of trade from India to Britain. Yet cracks showed. The treasury strained under army costs. Plague shrank the workforce. Frontier pressure grew. When Marcus Aurelius died in 180 CE, handing power to the unstable Commodus, Rome's long afternoon began to darken. The next chapter follows a century of upheaval, civil wars, breakaway states, and emperors who rose and fell at dizzying speed. When Marcus Aurelius died in 180 CE, he left the throne to his 18-year-old son Commodus, the first biological son to follow his father in 2 centuries. At first, Rome welcomed fresh energy. That feeling died fast. Commodus loved silk costumes, gladiator arenas, and hearing the crowd chant his name. He renamed every month after himself, fought staged battles in the Colosseum, and charged the city a fortune for the privilege of watching him win. Behind the glitter, government rotted. The Praetorian prefect Cleander sold public offices to the highest bidder. Grain shortages triggered riots. Cleander's head ended up on a pike. Commodus wrote kill lists on bathhouse tiles and trusted only a shrinking circle of favorites. On 31st December 1920, his wrestling partner and palace servants strangled him in his bath. Power now spun like a roulette wheel. First, Pertinax, an honest reformer, tried to cut palace expenses. The Praetorian Guard killed him after 86 days. 2. The Guard auctioned the throne to millionaire Didius Julianus. Mobs booed, provinces rebelled. 3 generals, Septimius, Severus, Danube, Pescennius Niger, Syria, and Clodius Albinus, Britain, marched for Rome. Severus reached the capital first, paid the guard, and disbanded it. In 2 sharp campaigns he crushed Niger in Asia and Albinus near Lyon. By 197 CE, Severus alone ruled. Septimius Severus, 1933 to 211, was a hard-edged African provincial who trusted soldiers over senators. He raised legion pay by 1/3, let soldiers marry officially for the first time, stationed a permanent legion in Italy, an unthinkable step under earlier emperors. His dying advice to sons Caracalla and Geta: pay the army, ignore everyone else. The brothers hated each other. Caracalla murdered Geta in their mother's arms and ordered a purge of 20,000 supposed supporters. Seeking popularity, he issued the Constitutio Antoniniana, 212 CE, giving Roman citizenship to almost every free male in the empire. The real aim: widen the tax net. Obsessed with Alexander the Great, Caracalla marched east in Macedonian kit until a bodyguard knifed him in 217. The next two rulers came from palace intrigue. Macrinus, the guard prefect who plotted Caracalla's death, lasted 1 year. Teenage priest king Elagabalus, 218 to 222, shocked Rome with wild religious rites and gender-bending marriages. The Praetorians replaced him with his sober cousin Alexander Severus. Alexander, 222 to 235, tried honest budgeting and diplomacy, but frontier soldiers viewed him as soft. On the Rhine, they lifted giant commander Maximinus Thrax onto a shield and proclaimed him emperor. Alexander and his mother were killed in their tent. With their blood, Rome entered the 3rd century crisis. For 30 chaotic years, Germanic tribes smashed across the Rhine and Danube. A revived Persian, Sassanid Empire captured cities in Syria, and in 260 seized Emperor Valerian, the only Roman ruler ever taken alive by an enemy king. Plague, likely smallpox, emptied towns and shrank tax rolls. Coin silver content plunged, prices soared. Breakaway states formed: the Gallic Empire, Gaul, Spain, Britain, and the Palmyrene kingdom of Queen Zenobia in the east. Emperors rose from army camps, ruled a year or two, then died by blade, arrow, or mutiny. Yet Rome still learned. Emperor Gallienus, sole reign 260 to 268, barred senators from military commands and created a fast cavalry reserve, the first true mobile field army. Frontline commanders began fortifying every major town. Watchtowers dotted the frontiers. Stability finally arrived with rough, brilliant Lucius Domitius Aurelianus, Aurelian, 270 to 275. In just 5 years, he, first, beat invading Goths, Vandals and Yuthungi. Second, abandoned exposed Dacia, modern Romania, to shorten the Danube line. 3. Destroyed the Gallic breakaway regime and defeated Queen Zenobia, absorbing Palmyra and Egypt. 4th, began the massive brick Aurelian walls around Rome, itself now a frontier city. Senate inscriptions hailed him Restitutor Orbis. He promoted the cult of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, to unify diverse peoples. But while preparing a Persian campaign, Aurelian was murdered by officers duped by a forged death list. After Aurelian, a string of short-lived emperors, Tacitus, Probus, Carus, and his sons, continued patch repairs, purging bandits, repelling raids, restoring the silver coin. Lightning killed Carus in Persia. Troops mutinied. The empire drifted again. Then, in 284 CE, near Nicomedia, Asia Minor, the army proclaimed yet another Illyrian officer, Diocles. Unlike previous claimants, this commander, soon to style himself Diocletian, looked beyond short-term survival. He paused, surveyed the cracked system, and began planning root and branch reconstruction. Shared rule, rigid budgets, and a refit of Roman identity itself. What changed and what didn't? The army owned politics. Any frontier legion could create an emperor. Provincial talent rose. Most rulers now came from Balkans, Syria, or Africa, not old Italian families. Barbarian units fought both for and against Rome. The border was a membrane, not a wall. Yet the empire's core laws, roads and towns survived. Even in chaos, Latin orders rang out, taxes were assessed, and amphitheatres hosted games. Adaptability, not marble, was Rome's true strength. By 284 CE, soldier emperors had proved that quick fixes could delay collapse, but not stop it. Diocletian would try something new. Divide power among 4 rulers, freeze prices, and anchor loyalty with a more distant, godlike throne. His success would reshape Europe and, through Christianity's rise, the future of world culture. The next chapter shows how Diocletian's radical blueprint, Constantine's cross-marked standards, and the slow crumbling of the western half pushed Rome into its late, fascinating second life. When Diocletian took power in 284 CE, he faced empty treasuries, rebel generals, and endless raids. One-man rule, he decided, was the problem. No single emperor could race from Britain to Syria fast enough. So in 293, he invented the tetrarchy, government by 4. Diocletian and old friend Maximian held the top title Augustus. 2 younger Caesars, Galerius, East Balkans, and Constantius Chlorus, Gaul and Britain, worked under them. Each ruled from the frontier, Nicomedia, Sirmium, Trier, and Milan, not from Rome. He cut big provinces into about 100 smaller ones, grouped them under 12 dioceses, and built layers of tax officials. Gold solidus coins replaced debased silver. Frontier troops, limitani, stayed in forts. Vast field armies, comitatenses, dashed to hotspots. Ceremony changed too. The emperor now wore jewels, sat behind guards, and expected bows. Ordinary people were supposed to feel awe, not familiarity. One problem defied reform: the fast-growing Christian faith, whose believers worshipped one God and refused imperial sacrifices. In 303, Diocletian ordered all churches torn down, scriptures burned, and clergy jailed. This great persecution was the harshest yet, but it failed. Christianity went underground, then returned stronger. In 305, Diocletian and Maximian shocked everyone by retiring, the only emperors ever to do so voluntarily. They hoped smooth succession would stick. It didn't. Civil wars flared among Caesars, Augusti, and assorted usurpers. The decisive clash came outside Rome at the Milvian Bridge in 312. Constantine, son of Constantius, said he saw a sky sign. In hoc signo vinces, by this sign you will win, and painted the Christ monogram. On his soldiers' shields, he won, became sole ruler of the West, and soon defeated the Eastern Augustus Licinius as well, 324. Constantine then legalized Christianity with the Edict of Milan, 313. Called the Council of Nicaea, 325, to settle doctrine. Founded a fresh capital, Constantinople, on the Bosporus, dedicated 330. It sat on the trade crossroads of Europe and Asia, and was easier to defend than old senatorial Rome. He kept pagan symbols too, hedging bets, but gave bishops tax breaks and built huge churches. After Constantine died in 337, his 3 sons split the empire and soon fought each other. By 364, 2 unrelated brothers ruled, Valentinian the First in the west and Valens in the east. From then on, east and west had separate courts, budgets and armies, linked by law but growing apart. Everything shook in 376, when the Huns, nomad horse archers from Central Asia, pushed the Goths to the Danube. Eastern Emperor Valens let tens of thousands cross as refugees, but corrupt officials starved and cheated them. The Goths revolted. At Adrianople, 378, they smashed the Roman field army and killed Valens. Proof that Roman infantry could be outclassed by mounted archers and heavy cavalry. New Eastern ruler Theodosius I made peace, letting the Goths settle inside the empire as foederati, allied warriors under their own leaders but answering Roman call. It was a quick fix with long-term risks. When Theodosius died in 395, he left young sons Arcadius, east, and Honorius, west. The empire was now permanently divided, though people still called both halves Roman. Honorius hid in marsh-surrounded Ravenna, safe from attack but far from reality. His gifted general Stilicho, half Vandal, did the heavy lifting, until court rivals had him executed, 408. The Visigoth king Alaric used the chaos to demand overdue pay, then marched on Rome itself. 410 CE. Visigoths entered Rome and looted for 3 days, the first sack in 800 years. Psychological damage outweighed material loss, but it showed the walls were no longer sacred. Across the Rhine, Vandals, Suebi, and Alans crossed the frozen river on New Year's night, 406, and spread through Gaul and Spain. Britain, stripped of troops, slipped from Roman hands. A capable West general, Flavius Aetius, forged alliances with Huns, Goths, and Franks to keep the map together. In 451, he and Visigoth forces met Attila the Hun at the Catalonian plains, France. The battle was a bloody draw. Attila retreated, tried Italy the next year, but Pope Leo I and lack of supplies turned him back. Aetius was murdered by jealous Emperor Valentinian III, 454. 2 years later, Valentinian himself was killed. The throne became a revolving door run by Germanic warlords, Ricimer, Gundobad, Orestes, each setting up puppet emperors. Meanwhile, the Vandals sailed from Africa and sacked Rome for 2 weeks in 455. Not as brutal as legend, but devastating to prestige. In 475, the army commander Orestes put his teenage son Romulus Augustulus on the throne. Germanic foederati wanted Italian land. Orestes refused. Their leader Odoacer marched on Ravenna, killed Orestes, and deposed the boy on 4 September 476. Odoacer did not claim to be emperor. He sent the imperial regalia to Eastern Emperor Zeno, saying one emperor was enough. Zeno made him patrician, and nominal governor of Italy. Historians later marked 476 as the fall of the Western Roman Empire. But everyday life changed slowly. Roman law stayed, senators still met, and Latin remained the language of power. What truly disappeared was the Western court and its tax system. The East, soon called Byzantine, kept the Roman name and carried the flame for another 1,000 years. Why the West collapsed? 1. Economic strain, war costs, shrinking taxpayer base, and currency trouble. 2nd, military overstretch, endless frontiers, reliance on Federate troops with divided loyalties. 3. Political chaos, coups and short reigns scared off long-term planning. 4. Disease and demography, recurring plagues cut population and workforce. The East faced the same storms but had denser cities, deeper treasuries, and more defensible geography, letting it survive. What survived? Roman law codes, city layouts, Latin vocabulary, and Christian institutions all lived on. Germanic kings styled themselves Rex Romanorum, King of the Romans, or, in Odoacer's case, simply governed in the name of the emperor. In truth, Rome had stopped being a political superpower in the West, but it remained the cultural and legal skeleton of Europe. The next chapter follows that eastern half, Byzantium, through its own highs and lows, from Justinian's shimmering Hagia Sophia to the axe blows of Crusaders and Ottomans, ending at the walls of Constantinople in 1453. When the Western Empire folded in 476, the East, governed from Constantinople, kept going. Its people still called themselves Romaioi, Romans. Outsiders later named them Byzantines, after Old Greek Byzantian. They used Roman law, Greek language, and Christian faith, and crucially, they still had money in the bank. The first big fixer was Emperor Anastasius, 491 to 518. He replaced messy copper coins with a new follis stamped with large numerals, easy for markets. Cut waste, cancelled unpopular taxes, and by his death left £320,000 of gold in the vault. This cash cushion let later rulers dream big. In 527, a Balkan soldier's nephew became Justinian I. With his sharp former actress wife Theodora, he aimed to rebuild the lost empire. Three greatest projects. First law, the Corpus Juris Civilis, a 4-book update of every Roman statute, later inspired Europe's civil codes. Second splendor. After the 532 Nika riots burned half the city, Justinian cleared the rubble and raised the Hagia Sophia. Its soaring dome, lit by 40 windows, seemed to hang by miracle. Third war. General Belisarius sailed with 15,000 men, smashed the Vandals in north. Africa, 533, jumped to Sicily and pushed up Italy. By 555, Constantinople controlled Carthage, Rome, and most Mediterranean coasts again. But victory had a bill. Endless sieges wrecked Italy, and in 541, a bubonic plague may have killed a third of the empire. Justinian paid Persia to stay quiet. Successors could not. In 602, a coup brought brutal focus to power. Persia's Khosrow II invaded for revenge, grabbing Syria, Egypt, even Jerusalem's true cross. Salvation came from Heraclius, ex-governor of Africa. He sailed to Constantinople, deposed Phocas, 610, and spent a decade rebuilding. Then, in a daring loop through Armenia, 622 to 628, he struck deep into Persia and won at Nineveh. The cross returned, crowds cheered. But both empires were bled white. Almost at once, Arab tribes united by Islam burst out of Arabia. In 636, they smashed a tired Byzantine army at Yarmouk. By 642, they held Syria and Egypt, the empire's grain barn. Losing rich provinces forced smart cuts. Emperors Constans II and Constantine IV carved what remained into themes, military districts. Soldiers farmed local plots, paying for their own gear and responding fast when raiders showed. Naval engineers invented Greek fire, a sticky liquid that flamed even on water squirted from bronze tubes. During the Arab siege of 717 to 718, Emperor Leo III used it to burn enemy ships. Starving besiegers retreated. Leo also launched iconoclasm, the banning of religious images, believing God punished idol worship. Icons were smashed, monks protested, and popes in Rome broke ties, widening the split between Greek East and Latin West. Icons were restored in 787, banned again, and finally brought back for good in 843. Striking figure, Empress Irene, R797 to 802, ruled after blinding her own son. Western kings said a woman couldn't be Roman emperor, so on Christmas 800, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne Emperor of the Romans in the West, an insult Byzantium never forgot. Real revival began with Basil I, R. 867-886, a Macedonian stable boy turned palace guard. He murdered the reigning emperor and founded the Macedonian dynasty. Basil issued the Basilica, a Greek update of Justinian's law, sponsored Cyril and Methodius, who created the Glagolitic, then Cyrillic, script for Slavs, spreading Byzantine faith and culture north. Under Basil's heirs, Leo VI, Constantine VII, Nikephoros II Phocas, and John I Tzimiskes, Byzantium retook Crete and Cyprus from Muslim pirates, pushed east, seizing border cities in Syria, filled Constantinople with glittering mosaics and lively book copyists. The bureaucracy drafted detailed manuals, one on ruling foreign peoples, De Administrando Imperio, another on battle tactics, Tactica. Diplomacy plus military science kept borders mostly safe. Basil II, the Bulgar slayer. In 976, 20-year-old Basil II inherited plots and revolts. He crushed rebel aristocrats with help from axe-swinging Varangian Guard. Norse and Rus mercenaries paid in gold. His main foe, Tsar Samuel of Bulgaria. After decades of mountain warfare, Basil trapped the Bulgars at Clydian Pass, 1014. Legend says he blinded 14,000 prisoners, sending one one-eyed man per 100 to lead the rest home. Samuel died of shock. By 1018, Bulgaria was a Byzantine province, and Basil earned the nickname Bulgar Slayer. When he died in 1025, the treasury overflowed, the army was professional, and borders stretched from the Danube to Syria and from Armenia to southern Italy. Constantinople's markets buzzed with furs from Rus, spices from India, and silk woven in palace workshops. Why this era mattered? Adaptability. Losing half the empire forced new defense, themes, and new weapons, Greek fire. Cultural export, law books, Greek learning, and Orthodox Christianity spread to Slavs and Rus, shaping Eastern Europe. Economic muscle. Gold solidi stayed trusted worldwide. Merchants from Venice to Baghdad accepted them without weighing. Survival model. While the West splintered, Byzantium showed a centralized state could ride out invasion, plague, and religious controversy, and still project influence. Yet success bred new threats. Rich generals gaining private loyalty, ambitious Normans eyeing Italy, and a fierce Turkic people, the Seljuks, advancing across Persia. In the next chapter, this bright empire hit sudden turbulence, civil wars, crusaders, and finally, cannon thunder at Constantinople's walls in 1453. When Basil II died in 1025, he left no sons, only packed treasuries and quiet borders. His heirs treated the surplus like a bottomless purse. Emperors Constantine VIII, his glamorous daughters Zoe and Theodora, and a parade of short-lived husbands spent on races, jewels, and court pensions. At the same time, big landowners in Asia Minor bought out small farmers, the very men who had filled the old theme armies. Fewer free soldiers meant hiring costly mercenaries. Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes tried to reassert control over frontier forts against the rising Seljuk Turks. On 26 August 1071, near the town of Manzikert, eastern Turkey, Romanos's army was betrayed by a rival general, panicked, and collapsed under Seljuk arrows. The emperor was captured, then released. Anatolia's door was wide open. Within a decade, most of Asia Minor, backbone of Byzantine tax and manpower, split into small Turkish states. Enter the war-seasoned General Alexios, the first Komnenos, 981 முதல் 1118. Surrounded by Normans in the west, Pechenegs in the north, and Seljuks in the east, Alexios did three smart things. 1. Allied with Venice, trading tax-free port rights for ships. 2. Begged help from the west. His appeal sparked Pope Urban II. Call for the first. Crusade, 1095. Tens of thousands of armoured Franks stormed through Constantinople, swore to return captured towns, and, amazingly, did. Nicaea and parts of western Anatolia were restored. 3. Created the pronoia system, parcels of land income granted to cavalry officers in exchange for lifetime service, an echo of medieval feudal fiefs. Alexios' son, John II, and flashy grandson Manuel I pushed the recovery. Imperial flags waved again over Cilicia. Commerce boomed. Constantinople dazzled visiting crusaders with silk markets and gold mosaics. Yet the revival rode on delicate deals, deeper tax breaks to Venice, heavy spending on court shows, and dependence on mercenaries. In 1176, Manuel marched to reclaim Inner Anatolia, but was ambushed by Seljuks and Myriokephalon. Though not a total disaster, it proved the plateau was lost for good. After Manuel, weak rulers handed real power to court favourites. The greedy Angeloi brothers drained the treasury and let the fleet rot. Prince Alexios IV Angelos, deposed by his uncle, begged the Fourth Crusade, then camped in Venice, for rescue. He promised mountains of gold and church reunion. The cash never materialized. Angry, unpaid crusaders and Venetian sailors turned their weapons on Constantinople. April 1204. Walls breached, fires lit, 3 days of looting. Bronze horses went to St. Mark's Square. Relics filled western cathedrals. Nuns fled burning convents. A short-lived Latin empire was set up. Venice grabbed Crete and key ports. Byzantine nobles escaped and built 3 rump states: Nicaea, Asia Minor; Trebizond, Black Sea coast; and Epirus, western Greece. Nicaea, led by the sharp Theodore I Lascaris, and later the savvy John III Vatatzes, became the core of recovery, reopening schools, rearming, and playing Turks against Crusader lords. In 1261, Nicaean general Alexios Strategopoulos sneaked into Constantinople while the Latin garrison was away. He opened the gates for Michael VIII Palaiologos, who entered Hagia Sophia barefoot in triumph. But the restored empire was a shriveled torso. Most of Greece owed taxes to the Angevin French or Venetians. Asia Minor was mostly Turkish. Hefty trade concessions to Genoa, a counterweight to Venice, bled customs revenue. Michael's grandson Andronicus II cut the navy to save cash, disastrous, raised taxes, and sparked civil war with grandson Andronicus III. Both factions hired Turkish and Catalan mercenaries. The Catalan company ravaged Thrace, then sold service to the Turks. One hired group, the Ottomans, started as a small border emirate. By 1326, they had a capital at Bursa. In 1354, an earthquake cracked the walls of Gallipoli. Ottoman troops slipped across the Dardanelles and never left. Victories at Maritsa, 1371, and Kosovo, 1389, broke Serbia. Byzantium shrank to Constantinople plus a few towns. Emperors paid tribute and supplied ceremonial troops to the Sultan. Western aid depended on church union. Emperor John VIII accepted reunion terms at the Council of Florence, 1439. The deal was unpopular at home. Priests and people chanted, "Better the Sultan's turban than the Pope's hat." A promised crusade ended in a crushing Ottoman victory at Varna, 1444. Young, driven Mehmed II, r. 1451 to 1481, wanted Constantinople as his capital. He hired Hungarian cannon maker Orban to cast huge bombards, built Rumeli Hisar fortress to cut Black Sea grain to the city. On 6th of April, 1453, about 80,000 Ottomans surrounded 7,000 defenders, Greeks, Genoese, Venetians, a few volunteers from Europe. Giant guns battered the walls. Mehmed rolled ships over greased logs into the Golden Horn. 29th May 1453, final assault. Genoese commander Giovanni Giustiniani was wounded. The line buckled at the St. Romanus Gate. Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos threw off his purple cloak and died with his soldiers. Ottomans poured in. Hagia Sophia became a mosque before sunset. Mehmed allowed looting for one day, then restored order and called himself Kaiser I-Rum, Caesar of the Romans. Greek scholars fleeing the city seeded the Italian Renaissance with ancient texts. In Moscow, Grand Prince Ivan III married the last Palaiologos princess and styled himself Tsar, Caesar, claiming Moscow as a third Rome. Orthodox liturgy, Roman law traditions, and the double-headed eagle lived on far from the Bosporus. But the eastern half of the Roman Empire, born when Constantine founded his new Rome in 330, was gone. Its walls had held for 1,100 years against Huns, Persians, Crusaders, and Bulgars, only to fall to gunpowder artillery and a determined young sultan. Why the fall happened? First, loss of Anatolia, after Manzikert cut tax base and soldier pool. Second Fourth Crusade smashed the fleet, treasury, and prestige. 3. Internal civil wars drained resources needed for defense. Fourth Ottoman skill and firepower made old walls obsolete. The political empire ended, but its ideas did not. Roman law shaped European codes. Orthodox rituals spread to Slavs. Domed churches inspired Ottoman mosques. The final chapter follows these aftershocks, from Renaissance humanists and Napoleonic codes to modern capitals built in neoclassical stone, showing how Rome's ghost keeps walking. Rome without an emperor. When the Ottomans took Constantinople in 1453, the last piece of Rome's political map vanished. Yet no one threw the idea of Rome in the trash. Kings, popes, lawyers, artists, even rebel colonies across the ocean, still reached for Roman words, laws, and symbols to prove they were legitimate. Long before 1453, German kings had called themselves Holy Roman Emperors. After the fall of Byzantium, they doubled down. Maximilian I, r. 1493 to 1519, filled parades with double-headed eagles and actors dressed as Caesars. Charles V signed papers Carolus Romanorum Imperator and pictured his realm as a Christian version of Trajan's empire, from Peru to the Danube. The empire was messy. Voltaire joked it was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. But its courts used Roman law taught at universities in Bologna, Prague, and Vienna. When Napoleon finally dissolved the Holy Roman Empire in 1806, its legal habits stayed behind in German civil codes. In tiny Vatican City, popes claimed to be spiritual heirs of Peter and guardians of old Rome. The result? Julius II hired Bramante and Michelangelo to rebuild St. Peter's with arches and domes that echoed the baths of Caracalla. Sixtus V realigned streets so pilgrims could march down straight imperial-style avenues toward obelisks he yanked out of ancient circus ruins. Latin, the Senate's tongue, remained the Vatican's working language into the 20th century. Scholars who fled Constantinople carried battered manuscripts of Homer, Plato, and Polybius to Italian cities. There, humanists like Marsilio Ficino translated and discussed them. Around the same time, 1450s, Gutenberg's press stamped books in crisp Roman type. Literacy and cheap paper let Roman ideas spread at a speed emperors could only dream about. Renaissance artists mined the ruins for inspiration. Michelangelo's David stands in the contrapposto pose of a Greek athlete. Raphael's School of Athens packs philosophers in togas under barrel vaults copied from imperial baths. They weren't just copying style. They were saying, if you want real greatness, act like the ancients. Gunpowder killed the legion-style infantry line, yet Roman books stayed on officers' desks. Machiavelli's Art of War praised manipular flexibility, and his discourses on Livy claimed citizen armies make republic strong. Across the Atlantic, American rebels steeped in those books built a new state. A senate meets under a capitol dome shaped like the Pantheon. Latin mottos, E pluribus unum, Novus Ordo Seclorum, sit on every dollar bill. In 1704, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself emperor, wearing a laurel wreath, posed for painter Jacques-Louis David like Augustus, and issued the Code Napoleon. The code simplified laws on contracts, property and family, direct descendants of Justinian's 6th century work. French armies spread it from Warsaw to Cadiz. Many European civil codes still echo its chapters. 19th and early 20th century leaders built capital cities in stone colonnades. Washington, D.C., White House portico, Lincoln Memorial Temple. London, British Museum facade. Berlin and Vienna, Parliament buildings with Corinthian rows. But Rome's imagery could bless tyranny as well. Mussolini paved the Via dell'Impero, filled rallies with SPQR banners, and saluted crowds like imagined legions. Nazi architect Albert Speer sketched Germania with arches dwarfing the Colosseum, and Hitler's eagle mimicked the imperial standard. The lesson: marble columns do not come with built-in ethics. So who owns the Roman legacy? Scholars argue, is the European Union a modern Rome? Is the US a new Rome? Russia's Tsars claimed Moscow was a third Rome. Even the Ottoman sultans called themselves Caesars of Rum. The truth: no single state owns it. Roman ideas are now global software running on many political computers. Why Rome still matters. Historian Theodore Mommsen said Rome died of its own greatness. Expansion spread citizenship, law, and trade so widely that people no longer needed the original center. Yet that spread keeps Rome alive wherever. Laws restrain arbitrary power. Engineers arch stone into bridges. Citizens vote in assemblies, modern or virtual. A child traces alphabet letters first carved on Trajan's column. Today, satellites map the moon's mare tranquillitatis with Latin names. Space probes carry Roman myth badges: Juno, Europa Clipper. The language of legionaries labels craters on Mars. Rome started as a village, became an empire, splintered into churches, codes, and myths, and now lives in fiber optic cables and legal textbooks. Its rise and fall warn about power. Its survival in ideas proves that culture can outlast armies. So the last line is the same one Romans carved on tombs of loved ones. Roma eterna, Rome eternal. Not eternal marble or eternal borders, but an endless conversation about laws, rights, beauty, and ambition. A conversation that now belongs to everyone.